Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I died from overwork, worn down by years of caring for the Walker family. I passed away 1 week before my 53rd birthday. In the first year after my death, my husband held a grand wedding and married his one true love, his first love, his so-called white moonlight. My son respectfully called her mom. My in-laws affectionately called her daughter-in-law. Just a month after the wedding, my husband took his beloved around the world on a romantic honeymoon. Their social media was flooded with photos of their sweet love, making everyone envious. What disgusted me the most was that their so-called happiness was built on the sacrifices of my parents. The house they lived in, every penny they spent, it all came from my family. Yet no one remembered me, the wife who had stood by him through thick and thin. Only my daughter, Ava, whom I hadn't treated kindly while I was alive, stood up to object. But a married daughter is like spilled water, no longer considered part of the family. She had no real say in the household. All she could do was watch it all unfold helplessly. When I saw her gently wiping the dust off my tombstone, only then did I realize how foolish I had been in life. If I could choose again, I would never blindly devote myself, working tirelessly just to pave the way for others. I would protect myself and those who truly loved me. I would never allow anyone to bully us again. Perhaps heaven took pity on me, because I was reborn. When I opened my eyes in a daze, the scene before me felt both familiar and unfamiliar. "Mom, you're finally awake." A soft little girl's voice rang in my ears. It sounded just like Ava's voice when she was little. I turned my head and looked. It was my daughter, Ava, but she looked only about 10 years old. I stared at her in disbelief. Could it really be? Did heaven truly grant me a second chance at life? I struggled to sit up, my head dizzy, my whole body weak. Ava looked at me with concern. "Mom, you have a fever. I just gave you some medicine to bring it down. Do you feel a bit better now?" I looked at the girl in front of me. Her tiny ponytail, her soft, delicate face, her brows carrying traces of my own features. She was so sweet and considerate. How could I have been so cruel to such a gentle soul in my previous life? The moment that thought crossed my mind, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. Ava thought I was in pain. She wanted to hug me but seemed afraid. So she cautiously reached out to touch my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. You can give my room to my little brother. I can sleep in the small room. As long as you're not mad at me, that's okay." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body go stiff and motionless. "Ava, how could I ever be angry with you? You're so well-behaved and thoughtful. Mommy couldn't love you more. After she passed away in my previous life, I hardly ever held her like this. Every day I was busy tending to my husband and son. Not just me. Everyone in the family seemed to ignore her. If my son cried even a little, she was the one who got scolded or punished. All the toys in the house were for him. All the new clothes, too. Ava was always quietly playing in the corner of the living room, holding on to a toy she desperately wanted but never received, or playing with the ones her brother didn't want anymore. When it came to meals, my son was allowed to be picky. But if Ava didn't want to eat something, we'd just tell her not to eat at all. Thinking about all of this now, I realized just how unfit I had been as a mother. I had grown up being pampered by my own parents. So why did I adopt such a biased mindset that favored boys after I got married? I looked at Ava carefully. Everything before was Mommy's fault. I let you suffer so much. I swear from now on I'll love you with all my heart. I won't let your little brother bully you again. And if he does, I won't take his side." "Really?" Ava's eyes lit up. "Then will I have my own toys too, and new clothes to wear?" I choked up, unable to hold back the lump in my throat. "Of course, from now on, my Ava will never wear hand-me-downs again. You'll have your own pretty dresses. Princess dresses. Mommy will dress you up like a little princess. So beautiful and sweet. You're the best, Mommy. I love you the most." Ava hugged me tightly. I gently stroked her hair. How could I have mistreated such a kind, sweet child? Even though I treated her so poorly in the past, just 2 kind words were still enough to make Ava say, "Mommy loves you." Just as I was sharing this warm moment with my daughter, the bedroom door suddenly burst open. "How long do you plan to lie around just because of a fever? It's almost 5 o'clock. Ruben's about to get off work. Are you seriously not going to get up and make dinner? I turned toward the voice. It was my mother-in-law. The moment Ava heard her voice, I felt her body flinch in my arms. That single reaction said everything. It was clear that behind my back, this grandmother had been treating Ava horribly. Otherwise, why would Ava be so frightened the moment she heard her voice? Looking back now, I realized just how much I had neglected my daughter in my past life. No wonder she once said she didn't want to call them grandpa and grandma anymore. It wasn't because she was being disrespectful. It was because something deeper was going on. I looked carefully at my mother-in-law. She didn't look much older than I had been when I died. At 53, my hair had already turned completely white. Wrinkles had crept across my face. My hands were rough, calloused from years of labor. Standing next to my husband, people would mistake me for his older sister, even though I was actually 3 years younger than him. In contrast, my mother-in-law, who was 6 years older than I had been when I passed, looked full of energy. Her skin was smooth and well-maintained, her hair permed into fashionable curls. Anyone who saw her might think she was only 40. If it weren't for my tireless care and service, would she be living so comfortably? At that thought, my tone turned cold. I'm not feeling well. I don't want to cook today. In my past life, I had always been obedient. No matter how unreasonable my in-laws were, I swallowed every insult, bore every demand, and never once talked back. So when I said that one sentence, she was clearly stunned. Her voice rose in volume, full of mockery. What? You catch a little cold and suddenly you're too delicate to lift a finger? Susie, you married into the Walker family. Taking care of your in-laws is your responsibility. Are you really going to let the two of us old folks starve just because of a little fever? Typical of a nouveau riche daughter. No upbringing whatsoever. We should have never let you marry into this family. There it was again, those two phrases I had heard over and over until the day I died. Nouveau riche with no upbringing and shouldn't have married into the Walker family. I sneered inside. If it weren't for me, the so-called nouveau riche daughter, would the Walkers be living in such comfort now? Would they have been able to afford a house in the provincial capital? Would they have raised such an accomplished son? They looked down on me for being a nouveau riche daughter. Yet they relied on me for everything. In my past life, I must have been out of my mind to believe their words and distance myself from the parents who loved me most. I didn't bother to argue further, but I knew now wasn't the right time to fall out with them completely. People who do wrong must eventually pay the price. Since heaven had given me another chance at life, maybe it couldn't stand their hypocrisy either. I softened my tone. Mom, I really don't feel well today. Why don't you and Dad take the kids out to eat? If I don't get enough rest and end up getting you both sick, that wouldn't be good. I'm not worried about myself, but you and Dad aren't young anymore. If either of you catches something, it could be serious. My mother-in-law was terrified of getting sick. Not because she worried about money, but because she had several underlying conditions. Even a small illness could trigger something worse. In my previous life, thanks to my careful care, she had rarely fallen ill. Sure enough, after hearing my words, she instinctively stepped back a few paces, walked to the door, and covered her nose with her hand. Why didn't you say so earlier? Don't you dare step out of this room today. We don't want your germs. Ruben and I will take Anson out to eat. That girl Ava's been with you all this time. Who knows if she's already infected? Let her stay and take care of you. At her venomous words, something flashed in my eyes. My hands clenched into fists. If I could, I would have walked right up and torn that woman's mouth apart. How dare she say such a thing about my daughter? Mommy, I don't want to leave, Ava cried, clinging to the hem of my shirt. Her eyes were filled with tears. I want to stay and take care of you. My heart ached as I gently touched Ava's soft, tender little face. I comforted her gently. You're such a thoughtful girl, sweetheart. Then let's stay home together. Just you and me. I looked up at my mother-in-law, who was still standing at the doorway. You two go ahead. Ava and I will stay home. It's just a fever. Nothing serious. My mother-in-law muttered something and then slammed the door hard. From the living room, I heard her irritated voice. You'd think she was on her deathbed just because of a fever. Ruben's dad. Let's take Anson out to eat. Call Ruben and tell him his wife's sick and won't cook dinner. Let him eat out tonight too. Huh. Exactly like the last life. Something so normal could always become something interesting. Once twisted by her mouth, even stirring up unnecessary family conflict. The noise in the living room ended with the sound of the door closing. Everything went quiet again. Ava looked at me and said softly, "Mommy, I'll cook something for you." I looked at this kind, considerate daughter of mine, and then thought about my 8-year-old son, who hadn't even shown his face since I woke up. My heart went cold. In my past life, I had poured every ounce of love into that boy. Whatever he wanted, I gave. Whenever he cried, my heart broke. When his grades fell, I hired tutors. When he didn't get into high school, I went begging for favors. When he got a girl pregnant, I was the one apologizing. Even when I was sick, I transferred the house my parents had left me into his name. And yet, through all of it, he never once cared for me at my bedside. Maybe that was heaven's punishment for me. Blind affection only harms both the giver and the receiver. My son hadn't just been spoiled by me. His grandparents had doted on him even more. I had made my mistakes, but I never failed in trying to teach him the right values. Now that I think about it, he used to listen to me when he was younger, but as he grew, he became increasingly rebellious and drifted closer to his grandparents. Perhaps someone had been influencing him all along. I pulled Ava closer and asked her carefully, "Ava, tell Mommy, if we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house now, would you be happy?" Her eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, Grandpa and Grandma are the best. They always buy me yummy treats. And when Anson tries to take my toys, Grandma stands up for me. I love them the most. Mommy, are we going now?" So I hadn't been wrong after all. In my previous life, my parents had scolded me more than once for being unfair, but I had always pretended not to hear. That's why they poured even more love into their granddaughter. So much so that when she got married, even though we, the parents, barely prepared a dowry for her, they gave her a whole apartment in their own name as a gift. I looked at Ava's joyful face, and all the bitterness in my heart seemed to fade. Yes, let's go to Grandma and Grandpa's house now. I quickly packed some clothes for the two of us. As I moved around the room, my eyes swept across the apartment and stopped at the calendar hanging on the wall in the living room. That's when I realized I had returned to 30 years ago. It was the first week of summer vacation. Ava would be starting 4th grade after the break, and Anson would be starting 2nd grade. And that summer, something very important had happened. Back then, I hadn't realized I was foolishly preparing everything for someone else's benefit at the expense of my own parents. As I carried our suitcase and took Ava downstairs, the world around me confirmed what I already suspected. I had truly been reborn. The busy city streets from my memory were gone. The towering buildings, the endless streams of cars, the blaring horns gone. The rushing crowds were nowhere to be seen. Thankfully, taxis still existed in this era. I raised my hand and hailed one, then gave the driver the address of my parents' home from memory. In my past life, after marrying Reuben Walker, I hardly ever went back to visit. Even when I did, I took the bus, and he knew perfectly well that my parents lived far away and there were no direct routes. Each trip took several transfers, but how often did he ever visit my family? You could count the times on one hand. He always reassured me with sweet talk. "Once I've made something of myself, I'll make your parents proud. I don't want to make things awkward for you." But now I see those were just excuses. He never considered my parents as his own. Just like his parents, he always looked down on my family. And in less than half an hour, the driver dropped us off at our destination, a 2-story Western-style house, which by today's standards would be considered a full-blown villa. As I stood in front of the place where I had grown up, my eyes welled up with tears. Suddenly, Ava pulled her hand free from mine and dashed ahead into the house, calling out joyfully, "Grandpa, Grandma, Mommy, and I came to visit you." Moments later, I heard a voice from inside. A voice that filled me with longing. "My precious granddaughter. What brings you here all of a sudden? Come, let Grandma take a good look at you. You've lost weight again, haven't you? Has that other grandma of yours been keeping food from you again? Just tell Grandma. I'll go teach them a lesson." "I've been eating well, Grandma. Mommy's here too," Ava replied sweetly. I stepped into the house and saw my mother, still so young. My emotions overwhelmed me, and tears burst from my eyes like a flood. I rushed forward and wrapped my arms around her tightly. My voice trembled as I murmured, "Mom, I missed you so much. I'm just so glad you're still well. It's not too late. From now on, I'll take good care of you and Dad. I won't let you worry about me anymore." My mother was taken aback, stunned by my sudden outburst. She had no idea what kind of suffering I had endured in the Walker household. While trying to comfort me, she began calling out loudly to my father, who was still outside in the yard. "Dawn, come quick. Our daughter's been bullied by those people. Look at her. She's crying like this. Can't even speak clearly." Within moments, my father came running in, holding an iron shovel he had grabbed from the garden. His voice boomed with anger. "I'm going over there right now to teach them a lesson. Making my daughter cry like this. They've gone too far." I looked at my father through my tears, still full of strength and fire, just as I remembered him. I released my mother, walked over, and wrapped my arms around his waist like I used to when I was little. I rested my head against his chest, feeling safe for the first time in so long. He stood tall, steady, maybe because we hadn't embraced like this in years. In my previous life, after I met Reuben Walker, my relationship with my father gradually grew distant, especially after I got married. He had always looked down on Reuben's family, calling them vulgar and pretentious. Every conversation we had seemed to end in an argument. "Chloe, is it that Walker family again? Did they bully you? Tell me. I'll make it right," my father demanded. The tears wouldn't stop falling. They soaked through his shirt. My mother, standing nearby, started crying too when she saw how heartbroken I was. She came over and hugged me from behind, her voice shaking. "Chloe, you're going to kill me with worry. Please tell us what happened." I raised my head and looked at them both, reaching out to gently wipe away the tears on my mother's face. The last people who should ever shed tears for me were the ones who loved me the most. How could I let them keep hurting like this? I felt so lucky. Lucky that they were still healthy. Lucky that I had been given the chance to change everything. In my past life, they had suffered deeply because of me. Not long after Ava's wedding, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He passed away soon after. My parents had shared a deep love their whole lives. So after losing him, my mother sank into depression and followed him just a month later. Their biggest concern in life had always been me. That's why they left everything. Their house, their savings, all of it to me. And yet, I still let them down. Everything they gave me was eventually tricked away by Reuben's family. Even when my father was sick, I wasn't there to care for him. Instead, all my attention was on Reuben's mother, who happened to fall ill around the same time. Reuben had brainwashed me, convincing me that I needed to care for his mother, not my own father. I was so foolish that I didn't even get to say goodbye to my dad before he died. I didn't want my parents to worry about me. So I made up a reason. I told them Ava had missed them, and that's why we came. As for my tears, I said they were just because I wasn't feeling well from being sick. They were half convinced, half doubtful. But since it was already late when we arrived and Ava and I hadn't had dinner, I asked my parents to take her out to eat and bring something back for me. Partly because I truly needed to rest, but more importantly, I needed time alone to think about my next steps. Once they left with Ava, I finally relaxed completely. Bringing Ava back to my parents' house, this time, I had no intention of returning to the Walker home. After all, only here, where I had no one watching, no one to guard against, could I fully focus on taking down Reuben Walker and his entire family. In my past life, they treated me without mercy. So in this life, they shouldn't blame me for being heartless. Ava and I had run away from that house, and by the third day at noon, we still hadn't heard a single word from anyone in Reuben's family. At lunch, my mom finally asked, clearly concerned, "Chloe, I've been meaning to ask you, didn't anyone from that family say anything when you left so suddenly?" It seemed she had picked up on something. After all, ever since I got married, I had never once stayed overnight at my parents' house. And now, not only had I stayed the night, I had been here for 3 days. My dad scoffed, clearly irritated. "What? My daughter stays at her own home for a few days, and they're supposed to have a problem with it? Just thinking about them pisses me off. That whole family crammed into a tiny house, And they still made my daughter and her son sleep in the smallest room while they enjoyed the big one themselves. They've got money but are too stingy to buy a proper place to live. Dawn, that's enough, my mom interrupted. Why are you saying these things in front of Chloe and Ava? I just can't stand their pretentious ways, my dad shot back. Chloe, if you're angry with me, that's fine, but I'll say it anyway. You and that family were never a good match. They've always looked down on us, and frankly, we were never good enough for them either. Dad. I cut him off. Ava was still here. And no matter how true his words were, and I agreed with every single one, I didn't want my daughter to carry the burden of that bitterness. After all, Reuben was still her father, and his parents were still her grandparents. No matter what, I wanted her to grow up happy and whole. I understand everything you're saying, but there are things I need to think through carefully. Please don't worry about me. My father looked like he still wanted to say more, but my mother silenced him with a glance. She knew me best. She understood there were some things I needed to handle in my own way. Even though Reuben's family hadn't come looking for me, I still needed to return. Before leaving, I pulled Ava aside into a room and gently told her I planned to divorce her father. I had expected her to resist or be upset, but instead, she threw her arms around me and said, "Mommy, I want to go with you. Please take me with you when you leave. I don't want to go back there. I want to stay here with you, with Grandma and Grandpa." Tears spilled down my cheeks. So she had longed to escape that painful home all along. In our past life, she never had the chance. But now I would make sure she got it. I would take her away from that place no matter what. I left Ava with my parents and returned to the Walker house that very afternoon. It was Sunday, and Reuben was probably out with Anson at the cultural center. My father-in-law wasn't home either. The moment I stepped through the door, I was greeted by my mother-in-law's sharp, venomous voice. "Oh, you remembered how to come back, huh? I thought you ran off with that little brat of yours to find some other man. Reuben must have been blind to fall for a cheap woman like you." That was her, always pretending to be the kind, doting mother-in-law in front of Reuben while doing everything she could to tear me down behind his back. But I wasn't the same submissive daughter-in-law she used to bully. I set my suitcase aside, walked up to her and said coldly, "Mom, do you really think I'm that kind of woman?" She froze, staring at me in disbelief, as if trying to figure out who I really was. In my past life, I had learned the truth from Robin. Back then, his father had to leave town to work just to support the family, leaving her and Reuben behind. But she couldn't stand the loneliness and ended up having an affair with a single man from the village. Divorce back then was seen as more disgraceful than death. So Reuben's father had countless arguments with her over the years. It wasn't until Reuben got into college and eventually got a job at the university, bringing them to the city, that things settled down. Still, that affair had always been a thorn in his father's heart, a source of lifelong shame. Watching her expression twist with discomfort, I pressed on. "Compared to you, Mom, I could never stoop so low as to fool around with another man right in front of my own son. You're really something else. I wonder if Dad still remembers all that. Should I bring it up to him sometime for old time's sake?" "How do you know about that?" she snapped. "What do you think?" I tossed the question back at her, then picked up my suitcase and walked into my room. As I looked around that cramped little space, I thought back to what my father had said earlier at lunch. This apartment had been assigned to Reuben by his workplace. It was a standard 2-bedroom, 1 living room layout. When we got married, we had agreed that we would take the master bedroom. But Reuben said his parents were getting older and had worked hard their whole lives, so we should let them have the bigger room. Looking back now, that was the moment he started brainwashing me. It was also the first of many compromises I would make. From then on, one concession after another slowly became something I just accepted as normal. Before we had children, the smaller bedroom was enough for Reuben and me. But after Ava was born, the space became clearly inadequate. Then when our son Anson came along, instead of rearranging things to make room for the kids, they chose to put a floor mat in their own bedroom for Ava to sleep on rather than share the bed with her. Starting from the age of 3, Ava had to sleep on a thin mattress on the floor while our son always shared the bed with us. And it wasn't because they couldn't afford a larger home. In our previous life, they had more than enough money to upgrade to a bigger place. But after learning that my family owned several properties, my mother-in-law started pressuring Ruben to lend money to their relatives. She claimed those relatives had helped them during Ruben's schooling years, but in reality, she just wanted to mooch off my dad's properties. My parents only gave us a spacious 4-bedroom apartment because they felt sorry for Ava. Yet their granddaughter still didn't get a proper room. Instead, her room was turned into a study, and a folding bed was added to the space. If I had to guess, it wouldn't be long before Ruben's family brought up that apartment again. Ruben came home with Anson around sunset. The moment I saw him, I couldn't suppress the surge of shock and anger inside me. He was in his prime. His career was steadily rising. If I remembered correctly, he was about to be promoted to associate professor. Back then, I was drawn to his scholarly image. I had only finished high school and never continued my education. And my parents weren't well educated either. So, the moment I met him, I fell hard. I never imagined that deep down he never truly respected me or my family. His ingrained bias against women had never changed, even if it was wrapped in the polite packaging of a so-called intellectual. The first thing out of his mouth wasn't concern about where I'd been these past few days. He didn't even ask why Ava wasn't home. No, the first thing he asked was about the apartment. Susie, about that apartment I mentioned last time. Did you talk to your dad? The kids are getting older. They need their own rooms. And my parents, well, they're not young anymore. All that stair climbing is bad for their health. I gave him a glance. You might have thought Ruben was a caring father and a filial son. But why should my parents be the ones to pay for all of this? I looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Don't you want to know where I've been these last few days? Or did you not even notice Ava wasn't home?" Ruben's expression stiffened. He quickly faked a concerned look and said, "Where's Ava? Did she upset you again and run off somewhere? Don't worry. Once she gets home, I'll give her a good talking to. They say daughters are their father's sweethearts from a past life. But clearly in Ruben's past life, he must have been born heartless." For the first time, I called him by his full name. "Ruben Walker. My dad said he's willing to give us that apartment. But it won't come for free. Your family has to contribute financially. And the apartment must be put under Ava's name." "What? You expect us to pay?" Ruben exploded, his face twisted in frustration. But he quickly regained his usual calm, slipping back into his manipulative, soft-spoken tone. "Chloe, that apartment is basically yours anyway. We're just enjoying it a little earlier, that's all. If it's already yours, why do we need to pay for it? And fine, we'll pay something if we have to. But why put it under Ava's name? She's a girl. She'll get married and leave someday. If we give the apartment to her, it'll end up in some other man's hands." I sneered. Ruben was surprisingly clear when it came to calculating things about our daughter. But didn't he realize I was someone's daughter too? Why was it okay for my parents to give me property for free? Wasn't that just another way of giving it all to his family? He knew how much my parents loved Ava. If only we had treated her better, they would never have thought of protecting her in this way. "Fine then," he muttered. "If that's too much for you, we can put the apartment under Anson's name instead. They're both grandchildren, aren't they? Your parents wouldn't really be that biased, right?" Ruben said. "Really? Then what about your parents?" I shot back. "Aren't Ava and Anson both their grandchildren too? So, why is it that your parents get to be blatantly biased and mine can't?" That one retort left Ruben speechless. He probably would never understand how his once obedient, quiet wife had come back after 3 days acting like a completely different person. Honestly, I didn't care whose name the house went under as long as it wasn't mine. It could be Ava or Anson, either one. But I was worried that if, in the end, Ruben's family refused to let me take Anson with me, then the house would just end up as a free gift to them. I knew how eager Ruben was to move into that new place. Because behind all of this, there was something even deeper going on. Something I didn't learn until after I died. They really had hidden it from me perfectly. Seeing that he was still hesitating, I sighed and added, "That apartment has 4 bedrooms and a great layout. The location is amazing. It's surrounded by the best schools in the city. As far as I know, none of your coworkers have a place like that. If we move in, they'll definitely see you in a new light. Plus, it's already fully furnished. My parents aren't trying to bankrupt you. They just want the renovation costs back. Besides, if you had to buy it yourself, you couldn't even afford a single bedroom, even if you sold everything you owned. Reuben finally asked, "How much do they want?" I gave a cold laugh. His pride was so fragile, so inherited. Reuben had been working at the university for almost 10 years. Most of his meals were provided by the school, and he hardly contributed a cent to our household expenses. My parents had been the ones quietly covering everything. He barely touched his salary for years. 50,000? My dad said. If it's less than that, don't bother, I replied. What? 50,000? Reuben was stunned. That's outrageous. Does your dad even understand how much that is? Do you know how many years it takes a normal family to save that much? Of course I know, I said calmly. But you should also know that apartment is worth way more than 50,000 on the market. Think carefully. Reuben fell silent for a moment, then looked at me and said, 50,000 isn't a small number. I'll have to discuss it with my parents, but I don't think they'll agree to put the apartment under Ava's name. Could we? Maybe. No. I cut him off firmly. I've already talked to my parents and they've made up their minds. Besides, someone else has their eye on that apartment. One of my dad's friends is willing to buy it at full market price. Do you really think we're in any position to bargain with them? At that, Reuben's face changed. He panicked, blurting out, Chloe, talk to your parents. We want the apartment. Please ask your dad not to sell it to his friend. I'll go talk to him right now. He rushed off to his parents' room like he was guarding some national secret, even shutting the door behind him. I didn't care. I just shrugged and walked into the living room where I saw Anson glued to the TV, completely focused. At first, my feelings toward Anson had been bitter. I had given him everything. So much love, so much care. And yet in the end he called another woman mom. That moment had shattered me completely. But during my days at my parents' house, as I reflected on everything from my past life, I realized just how badly I had failed him as a mother. My blind affection and indulgence had pushed him down the wrong path. He was still young now. There was time to fix it. He was still my child, the one I carried for 10 months. I couldn't just let him go and watch him become another version of Reuben. I walked over and turned off the TV, then sat beside him and wrapped my arms around his small body. Anson, your sister's staying at Grandma and Grandpa's house for a while. Do you want to go stay there too? His voice was soft and childlike. Mom, I don't want to go. Grandma and Grandpa don't like me. They say I bully Ava, but I didn't. I didn't bully her. And Grandma says I'm not allowed to go to their house. Why not? I asked gently. Grandpa and Grandma have lots of new toys. Grandma says, Grandpa and Grandma don't like me. They only like Ava. And she says, Grandpa and Grandma aren't educated people, and they'll be a bad influence on me. So it was just as I suspected. That old woman had been poisoning his mind from the beginning. I had really underestimated how far they were willing to go with their gossip. Uneducated. That label clearly belonged to them, not my parents. They couldn't even read a single proper word. If Reuben hadn't been a university lecturer, they wouldn't have had the nerve to look down on my parents like that. I looked at Anson and asked gently, Do you want to go? Your sister's been missing you these past few days. Grandma and Grandpa have too. They even bought lots of new toys for you. They've been waiting for you to come. Really? My son's eyes sparkled like twin moons, full of innocence and excitement. He was so pure and adorable at this age. How could I ever bring myself to let him grow up in that toxic environment? Of course I smiled. If you want to go, Mommy will take you there tomorrow morning. Anson's expression dimmed a little. But Grandma will be upset. I don't want to make Grandpa and Grandma mad. I gently stroked his head and comforted him. They won't be upset. Tomorrow they'll be happy to see you going to visit your other grandparents. But you have to promise, Mommy. Once you're there, you have to listen to Grandpa and Grandma, and you have to get along with your sister. Okay. He nodded. Seriously? I'll be good, he promised, then suddenly jumped up with joy. I can play with Ava again. Back in my room, I began packing his clothes. I had already made up my mind. I wouldn't just take Ava away from this family. There was no way I would leave Anson behind either. That evening, for the first time since our wedding, my mother-in-law actually cooked dinner. I could sense the sudden shift in tone from both her and my father-in-law, especially her. Not only had she prepared all my favorite dishes, she spent the entire meal praising my dedication to the family over the years. I kept my eyes on Anson as he ate. After he finished his meal, I quietly told him to go to the bedroom and play by himself. He was still young and wouldn't understand the kind of games adults played at the dinner table. With only the four of us left, my mother-in-law finally broke the silence. "Chloe," she said casually, "Ruben told me your parents are willing to give you that apartment. Is that true? I just knew your folks were generous. They really do care about you too. Giving away a house like it's nothing." I almost laughed. The way this old woman twisted things to her advantage was almost impressive. She always knew how to make everything sound so sweet and one-sided. I turned to Ruben, who had been silently eating. "Ruben, is that what you told them?" He didn't respond, just kept his head down. I looked around the table then said, "I'll only say this once. Since Ruben apparently didn't explain things clearly to you, I'll do it now. If he's not serious about the apartment, then I'll tell my parents tomorrow to forget it." "Chloe," Ruben quickly interrupted, panic in his voice. He turned to his parents. "Didn't we already talk about this? Why are we bringing it up again?" My father-in-law put down his chopsticks and looked at me with a hint of hesitation. "Chloe, does the apartment really have to be in Ava's name? It's not that I'm against it. It's just where we come from. People don't put property under a woman's name. If word got out back home, they'd talk. They'd say all kinds of things about the Walker family. Do you think maybe you could talk to your parents again? So now they cared about appearances. Funny how that concern never came up in our last life, when they bled my family dry." I put on a look of reluctance and said, "Dad, you know how much my parents adore Ava, and she's staying with them now. So of course they're thinking of her first. Even I, their own daughter, don't have that kind of claim." "And Anson? Well, they barely see him throughout the year." "Oh my, how forgetful I've been." My mother-in-law jumped in quickly. "Chloe, why don't you take Anson to visit your parents tomorrow morning? It's been so long since they saw him. And with summer break here, the kids can stay a while. If your parents don't mind, let them stay a bit longer before coming back." Exactly what I wanted. No need to say another word. I set down my chopsticks and returned to the bedroom. The next morning, I took Anson back to my parents' house. Their faces were filled with disbelief. They never imagined both of their grandchildren would end up returning to their side, one after the other. This time, I didn't hide my thoughts anymore. I told my parents directly and honestly that I had made up my mind to get a divorce. My father didn't hesitate for even a second. "Chloe," he said, "if you have the courage to leave, then we have the courage to support you and the kids." My mother added, "You're our only daughter. We don't expect you to be rich or powerful. We just want you to be happy. We still have some money saved. Even after we're gone, there'll be enough for you and the kids to live comfortably." I felt incredibly lucky to have parents who loved me this much. But I had been reborn. I couldn't just sit back and let them take care of me forever. I knew exactly what would make money in the future, and this time I would protect them. In the end, the apartment was registered under our son's name. Ruben emptied out his savings to give my parents 50,000 yuan. I asked my parents to start investing in real estate. I told them, money only loses value with time. Right after the apartment was handed over, Ruben became extremely eager to move in. So near the end of summer vacation, we moved out of the tiny apartment assigned to him, and into our new home. I told Ruben to sell the old place, but he said there was no rush. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Because of the move, Ava and Anson ended up spending the entire summer with my parents. When I brought them back, I noticed a huge change in Anson. He was no longer arrogant or unruly. He had become polite, considerate, and most surprisingly, completely obedient to his sister. He'd turned into the kind of little brother who followed Ava's every word. It made me genuinely happy. But when I was happy, someone else was bound to be upset. After we moved into the new home, Ruben started coming back later and later. Sometimes he wouldn't get home until after midnight, claiming he was busy with school evaluations. I didn't bother exposing his lies. I had more important things to deal with. His urgency could wait. My in-laws, on the other hand, were clearly bitter that I had taken the master bedroom. What bothered them even more was that Ava's room was larger than theirs. They brought it up several times with Ruben, complaining that they were getting old and their room was cold and drafty. Every time I shut them down. Back in your old house, the wind blew through the cracks and you never said a word. Now you want the best room in this apartment? My kids deserve the best. Why should they have to make room for you? If that's how it is, we might as well go back to the countryside, my mother-in-law snapped. Her past affair was still a sore spot in my father-in-law's heart, and they often quarreled about it in private. That day was no different. Soon, their voices rose in argument from their bedroom. Once again, I quietly stepped outside and walked to the unit next door, which belonged to one of Ruben's superiors from the university. That was another reason Ruben had fought so hard to move here. In my past life, it was because of this man that Ruben was promoted to associate professor at such a young age. The leader's wife was 10 years older than me. Her child was already in college, so she was often home alone. She really liked Ava and frequently came over to visit. Ruben and his family were, of course, happy to welcome her attention. I invited her over for dinner, mentioning that Ava would be home from school soon. She accepted gladly and came down with me to our place. As soon as we opened the door, we were greeted by the sound of chaos from the in-laws' bedroom. You rotten old woman. Were you really that desperate for a man back then? You cheated right in front of our son. Well, maybe if you hadn't been gone all year, I wouldn't have needed to find someone else. Who knows what you were doing out there? What I was doing, I'll kill you, you damn witch. Then came the sound of a scuffle, loud, violent, and unmistakable. By the time Ruben got home, everything had quieted down. I had already cleaned up the mess in their bedroom and thrown out the broken things. My mother-in-law sat on the sofa, her hair a tangled mess, sobbing with one hand covering her face, which was red and swollen. My father-in-law stood on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. Deep scratch marks ran down his face, angry red welts left by her fingernails. What happened? Ruben asked, wide-eyed. My supervisor said something happened at home. I pulled Ruben aside and calmly explained everything in detail. What did you say? He stared at me stunned. My parents got into a fight, and my supervisor's wife saw it happen. I nodded. Ruben was furious. Susie, why didn't you stop them? And why the hell was my supervisor's wife even in our home? I feigned innocence and said softly, I only did it because of you. You've been so busy lately with the promotion evaluations, and I thought, well, your supervisor's wife likes Ava, right? So I invited her over for dinner. I didn't expect this to happen. As I spoke, I forced out a few tears. Ruben immediately stepped forward to comfort me. I'm sorry, he said. I misunderstood you. I shook my head and looked at him with worry. She saw everything. Do you think this could affect your promotion? Ruben sighed and walked into the living room. He turned to his parents and snapped. Can't you make my life a little easier? Do you have any idea where we live now? What this neighborhood is after what happened today? Do you know how badly this could affect my career? My mother-in-law opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't seem to find the words. My father-in-law stepped up beside Ruben and asked anxiously, Isn't there anything we can do? Ruben looked at him exasperated. What can we do now? It's already happened. I watched the three of them with a trace of mockery in my smile, then slowly walked to Ruben's side. Actually, there might be a way. His eyes lit up and he grabbed my shoulders. Chloe, do you really have an idea? I glanced at my in-laws and hesitated, as if unsure whether to speak. I spoke with your supervisor's wife. I began. She said the promotion doesn't depend solely on ability. It's also about character. She said, today's incident didn't directly involve you, but it definitely didn't leave a good impression. And if someone else sees something like this again, there won't be a next time. My father-in-law interrupted, swearing in panic. Chloe, I promise it won't happen again. I looked at him reluctantly, then said, she said, the best way is for you both to go back to your hometown. Out of sight, out of mind. That way, no one else will ever find out. After a long silence, Reuben finally said, "Dad, Mom, pack your things tomorrow. I'll take you back to the countryside in a few days. Once the promotion's official, I'll bring you back." Behind me, I could still hear my father-in-law grumbling angrily, while my mother-in-law sobbed and wailed at the top of her lungs. After they left, the house suddenly felt much bigger and much quieter. With Reuben coming home late every night, I was more than happy to enjoy the peace. I focused all my attention on caring for the kids, and often took them to visit my parents. Their bond with my mom and dad grew stronger every day, especially Anson. One day I hinted to him, "What if Mommy and Daddy didn't live together anymore? Who would you want to stay with?" I hadn't expected his answer to come so quickly or so firmly. "I want to stay with you and Ava." His response caught me by surprise, but I was deeply relieved. Unsurprisingly, Reuben's promotion went through. He became the youngest associate professor at the university and basked in the praise and admiration. But I could feel the shift in his attitude. His gaze toward me had turned impatient, distant. He barely spoke to me anymore, and even began mocking my lack of education. "We're not even on the same level," he muttered one night. I smirked coldly. So he had finally found someone he believed was his intellectual equal. He was growing tired of me now. But if I had helped him rise, I could just as easily drag him back down. Lately, I had been pressing him to sell his old apartment. "We already have a new place. It's just sitting there collecting dust. Either rent it out or sell it. Pick one." Reuben looked irritated. "Why do we have to sell it? We lived there for years. Don't you feel anything for it? You're so money-obsessed, just like your nouveau riche father." At that moment, my expression turned ice-cold. My eyes narrowed, filled with disgust. "Robin Walker, don't forget this fancy new home you're living in. It belongs to that nouveau riche father of mine." "Chloe, get your facts straight," he started. "This is my son's property," I said coldly. "Which means it's mine." Reuben scoffed. "You admit it's our son's and yet you still call it yours. On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I'm his father." I snorted. "That excuse won't work anymore." Reuben refused to sell the old apartment no matter what. Obviously, he was using it as his secret hideaway for another woman. He thought he'd been covering his tracks so well. But what he didn't know was that I had already told my parents everything. My dad even hired a private investigator to follow him. And they'd collected photo evidence of Reuben going to that place every evening after work. There hadn't been any solid proof of cheating yet. Back then, infidelity was still considered very serious without direct evidence. But there's no such thing as a cat that doesn't crave fish. The more he showed his disgust toward me, the more obvious it became how badly he wanted that woman. So why not give him what he wanted? This time I didn't back down. I stood firm about selling the apartment. The result was a full-blown argument. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. It was past 7 p.m., and I knew exactly where he was going, his little golden cage. As soon as he left, I called my dad. If you're going to catch someone in the act, you have to catch them red-handed, and the more witnesses, the better. By the time I arrived at the old apartment, my father and his brothers were already waiting downstairs. They were all tall, broad-shouldered men, and their imposing presence instantly made me feel protected. At that moment, I realized loyalty and love have nothing to do with education. Some people act like scholars, but the things they do are filthy and shameless. If Reuben dared come here tonight, it meant he was already looking for an excuse not to go home. Any excuse to be with her. I saw the bedroom lights turn on, then off again. I handed my father the spare key I had hidden away long ago. Moments later, we heard shouting and chaos coming from inside. Reuben, completely naked, was dragged out by one of my dad's friends like a chicken by the neck. The whole building came out to watch, and finally, I saw her. The woman who had stolen everything from me in my past life. She had that delicate first love kind of beauty. In proper clothes, she probably could have passed for a classy intellectual woman. But now she just looked like a common. The fallout was massive. Reuben didn't just lose his newly acquired position. He was publicly criticized by the university and fired on the spot. With nowhere else to turn, Reuben came crawling back, begging for forgiveness. I looked at him, kneeling at my doorstep, and felt nothing. How had I ever fallen for this parasite? How had I ever been so obsessed with him? There was no doubt anymore. I was going to divorce him. Of course, his family objected to letting me have custody of Anson, but that was expected. When it came to money, they didn't stand a chance. When it came to who the children preferred, it was obvious they had lost. Legally, they had no grounds to argue. I don't know how the Walkers are doing now, but one thing I'm sure of is they'll never again appear in my life or my children's. In the garden, I watched Ava and Anson playing happily with their grandfather. From the kitchen came the scent of delicious food being made by their grandmother. So this is what happiness feels like. So simple, yet so complete.